Alrighty, another edition of Aristotle's Musings. Today we're going to be talking about technical sales, which is what you and I likely do. We're going to be talking primarily about communication and learning, a couple of my best practices, also lots of book recommendations in this one. So let's get into it. So a lot of what I've been doing so far is what I call naming it to taming it. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with that, naming it to taming it, but it's a coping mechanism. It's putting a face on your struggles, right? It's like naming the monster in the closet. Monsters Inc., Disney Pixar movie. I hear Disney's quite litigious. I guess I'm testing that. So sorry, Disney. Anyways, what a brilliant concept for a movie. You have a monster in a closet that's terrorizing kids. And what do? They slap a name on it and they slap a funny face on it, a couple googly eyes on it, and all of a sudden it's no longer intimidating. It's no longer scary. It's no longer intimidating. It's actually a perfect platform for a movie, right? So they named the monsters Sully and Mike, like such childish, you know, affable, likable, non-intimidating names that they could possibly think of. Sully. I can't imagine a bully being named Sully. No, it's perfect. And they slap a funny name on him, and all of a sudden it disarms it. It makes it no longer an issue, no longer a point of conflict, but actually a point of fun and comic relief. So it's a pretty brilliant way. A lot of what I've been doing, your why, your dark why, the valley of disappointment, right? Plateau of latent potential, aim small, miss small. Like all of that is my somewhat sophomoric way of disarming stuff. If I can break it down into an easy to understand way or an easy to cope way, it's going to suit me better. Today, we're going to do a lot of that. So I heard about the process of learning. And for a while, I was struggling with this a little bit. But somebody finally showed me, I read about it actually. It was the process of learning. So we got Mario Andretti down here, one of the all-time great race car drivers. I don't know anything about racing, but it's a perfect platform for the analogy I'm going to make. So the process of learning goes like this. First, it's unconscious incompetence. That's where this little kid is. This little kid, unconscious incompetence. I don't know what I don't know. I've never heard of a car before. I just don't know anything about it. Then you go from not knowing what you don't know to conscious incompetence, which is knowing that you don't know very much, right? Knowing what you don't know. That's conscious incompetence. Then there's conscious competence, which is I can do that activity, but I have to think long and hard about it before I can actually do it. And then there's unconscious competence, which is where we all get to when we become the expert of something. We don't even have to think about it. We just do it, and we do it very, very well. So a baby, let's use a car, perfect. Again, so unconscious incompetence, a kid or baby doesn't even know. They never know. They don't know what this is. They don't have any concept of what a car is. They just go from A to B. They don't remember it, right? Then there's conscious incompetence. So you have a kid which now knows, oh, I don't know how to drive a car, but I know a lot. I know what a car is, but I have no idea how to drive one. Just totally beyond my capabilities. Then you have the teenager, which is the conscious competence. They hop in their car. They have to go through the steps in their head. All right, I will change the rear view mirror and make sure the side mirrors are good. Buckle it up. All right, put it into neutral. Clutch in. Turn on the gas. Okay, that's all good. Ease off the clutch. Ease on the gas. Shift into reverse. They can do it, but they have to think about it, right? When they are driving down that road, scary thing for all the parents, when they're driving down the road, they have to think about everything that's going on. They're not looking 5 cars ahead. They are looking 15 feet around their car, and that is it. That is all that they are capable of doing. They live in that conscious, competent stage. I can do it, but I have to think very hard to be able to do it. Then, fast forward, get to our age, and we drive to work, and half the time we don't even remember how we got there. That's unconscious competence. That is not, hey, oh no, we are a risk to everybody around us. No, we do that, and we do that so well that we don't even have to think about it anymore. It's like you and I walking. We just do not even have to think about it anymore. It's not that we're not aware. We're actually hyper aware. And if you don't believe me, you pull out of your driveway, you go from 5 miles an hour in your neighborhood, 15 miles an hour through your subdivision into highway, which is 75 miles an hour. And then you pull off your exit, and then all of a sudden you're back down to 20, and then you're going to work and you're driving through a crowded parking lot and you're going 5 miles an hour. We do all of that without even have to thinking about it. It's not that we're, again, not aware. It's actually, we're super hyper aware. We're looking 5 cars ahead. We know that we have to hit the brakes when we hit the brakes because we saw traffic 10 cars ahead of us that actually started to apply their brakes. That's where we get to. That is unconscious competence. You hear that term and you're like, that's not a good thing. It's absolutely a good thing. And it's what we do when we become an expert at something. Okay. The aha moment for me was when I realized that most home buyers live in this stage. They live in this unconscious incompetence to conscious competence. They either don't know what they don't know or they now know what they don't know. They live here. That's where most home buyers start their process. Once you realize that, it can reframe how you go about your business. When you realize that they occupy the space between unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence, it changes your attitude towards having these conversations. And for me, it caused me to dial things back. Dial things way back. I had to dial things way back so that I can build up to the point I'm trying to make. So when consumers are asking questions, a lot of the times they don't even know the questions that they're trying to ask. They simply do not know. The amount of times I've had somebody approach me and say, hey, I want to buy a second home, and not know what a second home is, I can't even count. People come up with that term, I want to buy a second home. In their head, it's the second home that I'm actually going to live in. For a lender, a second home means a vacation home, a home that's a reasonable distance away from their current primary residence, typically 50 miles away, that they plan on living in part of the year and that they don't intend to primarily rent out. That's a second home from a lender's perspective. But that's not what people are talking about. Right? That's because they live in the stage of unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. They don't even know what they're trying to ask. When you realize that people do not understand what they're trying to ask you, most of the time, it changes everything. Okay? So dial things way back and then find a foundation of agreement, find a foundation of common knowledge, and then slowly build up to the question that they're trying to ask. I have people say, hey, I'm curious about mortgage insurance. Start from scratch. Do you know what mortgage insurance is? I've had people come up to me and say, hey, I want to get mortgage insurance on my loan. I'm like, pretty sure you're confused. I don't think you want mortgage insurance. It's not a good thing. It's a necessary evil when you put less than 20% down. They're talking about an insurance program that would cover your housing payment if you ever ended up disabled or passed away. Completely different insurance product, right? So you dial things back to a common level of understanding. And sometimes there is no common level of understanding. You have to explain everything from scratch and then build up. So that's always been my approach. Again, when people talk about second homes, for instance, they're not even talking about what I think they're trying to talk about. They don't know. They don't know what they don't know. You have to start from a basic level of understanding and build up. And if they don't, I love this. It's one of probably my all-time favorite quote, actually, I'll say. If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? John Wooden. John Wooden, a Hall of Fame basketball coach, passed away some years ago. Absolutely brilliant coach. But his whole principle is that, right? If you do not have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it again? I make sure that when I respond to an email, I dial it way back, number one, and I take time to answer their question completely. It takes a lot longer, but it is totally worth it. And the reason it's totally worth it is because I could spend 15 emails going back and forth, or I could take the time, answer their question completely, wholly, and not have to go back and forth 25 times. Not only am I doing them a favor, but I'm doing myself a favor too, right? So maybe they don't even know what they're trying to ask. Dial things way back, answer completely and in kind, and then go from there. It's one of the biggest hurdles with our position, with our technical sales positions, is that we start to take it for granted what we do. We think that we know what they're trying to ask. We think that they have a basic level of understanding, but that's not always the case. Dial things way back, build it up from there. Promise you it's going to change everything for you. Take your time. Take your time. If you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it again? I tell my team that so many times that they start to say that I follow them home. Where, I did the laundry, but I wasn't going to take it to the other room. But if I don't have time to do it right, when I have time to do it, I better take this laundry with me. Or Brian Buffini used to say, make your trip work for you. Make your trip work for you. Whenever I go somewhere in the house, whenever I'm doing something around the office, I always make my trip work for me. I will go fill up my water, and then I'll go to the restroom, and I'll come back, pick up my water, and head back. I always make my trip work for me. Also, if they email me with bullets, I'm emailing them with bullets. If they email me in a longer paragraph, I'm going to try to email them in the same kind. And that gets us to mirroring. Okay, mirroring. People think that mirroring makes you disingenuous. That's not true. Again, remember our bell curve. Like, we all have different parts of our personality that we can tap into. Mirroring is just tapping into that portion of the bell curve that is most like them. That's really all it is. It's not a disingenuous version of yourself. No, it's just a genuine version of yourself that's on one end of the spectrum or another. And this picture's perfect. I could not really make it any better than I want. This is a perfect example of mirroring. They're both cross-legged. They're both wearing basically the same suit. They're both leaning in. They both have their arms in very similar positions. That's mirroring. That's mirroring. That is them each meeting each other on a common plane. That's all that mirroring is. Match their voice, their body position, gestures within your arch of comfortability. And again, it's not saying be disingenuous. Completely disagree with that. Do not be disingenuous, but tap into the genuine part of yourself that is most like them. That's all that mirroring really is. And think about your best referral partners. The chances are that they refer people to you that are very similar to them. Yeah, that's not by accident. We all work with those who are very similar to ourselves. We all work with those who are the most like ourselves. How similar are their clients to theirs? Chances are very, very, very certain. And not only that, but guess what? That referral partner, your best referral partners are also probably very much like you. That's not by accident, again. We all attract those who we're trying to attract, who are most like ourselves. And that's the whole point of your why, right? You're building out your brand, your best version of yourself, your core ideology, your core values, and then you're going to attract people that have very similar interests. Pro tip, this works with conflict as well. I remember one of my early days in the business, 2009, I was a loan officer assistant, and it was a really tough environment to do mortgages in. A lot of lenders were not wanting to be in the mortgage industry. It was very, very challenging to be in that industry at that time, and it was very frustrating. But as a loan officer assistant, sweet job, awesome job, love that job. Get a clock out at 5:30, don't have to work on the weekends, pretty sweet. Paid time off. I mean, as a pure commission loan officer, as a real estate agent, I'm like, what's that? What's paid time off? I have to pay significant amounts of money to take time off. The loan officer assistant, great position. But one of the loan officers I was working for at the time had a really bad day. And they were on a call, and this person is super zen, super cool, super calm, super collected, like never lets anything rattle him. And one day, I could hear the phone rattling on the other side as he was on a phone call, and this person was just screaming at him. And then he started giving it back to him. He did not go as far as they went. He was still respectful, but he was on the higher end of himself, a higher version of himself, a little bit shorter, a little bit louder, a little bit more gruff. And he hangs up the phone. I'm like, woof, you doing all right over there, buddy? Because that sounded like a rough call. And he's like, oh yeah, no, they were just full on F-bombs and just full on swearing at me. I'm like, so I guess you kind of kept things pretty well controlled. He's like, yeah, I've found, this was actually his advice to me. He's like, I found that when somebody gets upset, you have to get somewhat upset. If I send out a low appraisal and somebody gets really upset about that low appraisal, I'm not going to get upset at them, but I'm going to find that I'm going to get upset as well with the situation. They want to know that you're invested. If they're upset, they're invested. You kind of have to also get somewhat invested. I'm not saying scream at them, but I am saying that it is okay. You can tell your managing broker that Aaron Staufer said so. It's okay to meet them partway. If they get a little bit upset, it's okay for you to get a little upset. I still think it's important that we remain professional, that we are the calmer head, right? That cooler heads do prevail. But it's okay to meet them somewhere along the line of where they are going. It's worked surprisingly well with conflict. And honestly, sometimes they need to know that you care. Because if you are just cool, calm, zen monk on top of a hill, and they're really upset with the situation, and you come off that way, it can come off as disinterested and not caring. You need to show them that you do care a little bit. So, just a little tip. All right, so another wonderful book, Ninja Selling by Larry Kendall, another Colorado individual, Fort Collins, most everybody in our industry knows about Larry Kendall. Anyways, he talks about the golden rule versus the platinum rule. The golden rule is one we all know, right? We were all taught it as kids, like treat others as you would want to be treated. That's great. Larry Kendall does a sales pitch on the platinum rule, which is treat others as they want to be treated. It's not treating others as you want to be treated, it's treating others as they want to be treated. So being very mindful of where are they coming from. When a member gets upset, they're not typically upset with me. They're typically upset with the situation. They're upset with the fact that they've got 150 other things going on in their life, and then I asked for one more. I was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So being mindful of what's going on in their lives and making sure that you're treating them the way that they want to be treated. Critically important, especially in technical sales, because there's a lot that goes into it all. Another great book, The Go-Giver. Very short, very easy read, kind of like Raving Fans, if you've ever read that one. This one is very similar. I love this. The Law of Influence, another kind of piece of all these puzzles about communicating and technical sales, which is your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. 100% agree with that. I tell people all the time, I'll tell my referral partners all the time as well. If there's a better deal for a member, I'm going to let them know what it is and who to go to get it. Ultimately, I care significantly more about making sure that they are in the right position financially, even if it's ultimately not using me. I'm a big believer that you get out of life what you put into it. And if you take care of other people, they will take care of you. I've received referrals from people that I told to go elsewhere to get their mortgage needs met. They loved my service so much that they still sent me business that day later. Or they came back to me and they used me for their next one. I've had that happen too. So take care of them. Take care of them. Even if it doesn't suit you today, it'll take care of your tomorrow. And that's the difference between a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And I know that it's a very nice position to be in, to have that abundance mindset. But if you come at it from that abundance mindset of, hey, there's plenty of business to be had, if you just constantly keep that in mind and take care of them, it's going to come back around. If you have that scarcity mindset, you're going to be kind of stuck. And that gets to another Larry Kendall point, which is a non-anxious presence. You can't get too attached to the outcome. If you get too attached to the outcome, you start to have what he calls commission breath. They can smell it on you. And if you come at it from that angle, it's going to cause you to lose the deal. But when I come at it from, I just want to take care of them. I just want to do whatever's best for them, even if it's not ultimately using me. One, the referral partner feels more comfortable sending a deal to me. They know that I'm going to take care of their client, even if it means ultimately me not getting that commission. That's okay. I want what's best for them. I want what's best for the referral partner. So if you take that approach, if you take that abundance mindset, it's going to change the outcome of so very much. Again, maybe I'm wrong here, but I like to think I'm not. If you put it out, if you take care of them, the rest will take care of itself. You can't be too attached to that outcome. If you are, it is not going to be the best version of yourself. And then go from big picture to small picture. Buying a house is extremely stressful. It's a big, big, big decision. If you can break it up into smaller pieces, it's going to clear that logjam in their decision-making process. And here's a great mental exercise, okay? So imagine, close your eyes. Imagine a timeline. No specific beginning date or end date, but just imagine that you see literally a physical timeline. It probably looks like this. You can open your eyes again. It looks like this, right? There's a beginning point and an ending point, right? All right. Now, I'm going to ask you to do that again. But this time, imagine an infinite timeline. Close your eyes again. Imagine an infinite timeline. It probably looks like this. That's not infinite. That's nowhere close to infinite. It's just longer, right? We cannot comprehend it. We cannot comprehend infinity, right? Does not compute, system crashing, but we just can't do it, right? So you have to break things up into an easy to understand way. You have to break it up into an easy to understand way. And if you can do that, you can clear the logjam in their decision-making process. I constantly do that. I dial things way back. I take my time to respond in kind, fully, completely, and I make sure that I'm explaining it in very small, bite-sized pieces. And if there's too many, I'm getting them on the phone to do so. You have to clear that logjam. There's a lot that goes into what we do. We take it for granted because we've been doing it for so long. Occasionally, I'll take a loan application and I'll get to a member and I'll be like, hey, great, what's your social security number? And they'll like, am I supposed to give that information to you? I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that this is privileged information. I forgot that this is private, confidential information. I deal with so many social security numbers on a daily basis that I take it for granted. I forget. I completely forget that, oh yeah, what I'm asking is pretty private because we've just been doing it for so long, right? When I say, hey, this is a technical sales position, you're like, it's not technical. We're taking it for granted. That's exactly what we're doing. We are taking it for granted. It is very technical. All right. So another book, really good book about communicating, Rene Rodriguez. Very, 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 very good. So he talks about establishing a frame, which is the context, right? A frame is context for your conversation. He says a message without a frame tends to get away from us. You have to set up that context. He's big into setting up the context. A frame is everything. You have to have that context. Context is king. Whenever I have a conversation with a member, I tell them all the time, context is king. I'm going to give you more information than you probably want to know, but I feel like it's important. And whenever I wrap up the conversation, I'm like, was that helpful at all? They're like, oh, absolutely. You did more in 5 minutes than any other loan officer ever did for me because I'm giving them the context. I'm explaining hey, I'm looking at trying to get a loan. Great. There's 3 different types of loans. Let's talk about that. There's conventional financing, there's government financing, there's portfolio financing. The difference between the 3 are, and I have to go over them all. Once I do that, they're like, oh, all of a sudden this makes sense. They'll call me not even knowing what they're trying to call me for. I was told I was supposed to call you because this one condo, we're struggling to get financing on it. Oh, well, it's a non-warrantable condo. Here's what makes the condo non-warrantable, and here's why non-warrantable condos even exist. 2008, housing bubble pops. All of a sudden, the government starts blaming lenders because the lending restrictions were way too loose. And 2, they also blamed condos. And here's why they blamed condos. I give them all that context. Now they know significantly more. I covered in 2 minutes what they otherwise couldn't have gotten from me or anybody else for that matter. And now all of a sudden we can build up to what their question actually is. Frame, context, it's king. It's absolutely critically important to everything. Another thing that's important that Rene Rodriguez talks about, and a great book on communication, if you ever want to really dive into like the ins and outs of communication, super helpful book, Amplify Your Influence. He talks about a tie down, which it locks in the exact message that you're trying to do. Or what I'd call order of operations, right? Parentheses, exponential, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, right? PEMDAS. So I talk about order of operations all the time. Oh, great. So next steps, order of operations. Great. You've been pre-approved. Now you can start to look at homes. Once you go look at homes, then you're going to go. I have to give them all of the order of operations so that they can really create their map of what's going to happen. And I have to tie down the message. So when I wrap up the conversation, I always summarize exactly what I covered. So a tie down. Rene explains that without a tie down, you've created a message. It's like a helium-filled balloon. And without a tie down, you've just let it loose into the environment. You have to have a frame plus your message plus the tie down. And if you do all of that, you're going to finally have the influence. You're finally going to convey the message that you're trying to convey. Frame, message, tie down. Tie down is just as important. It is tying that helium-filled balloon to the ground so that it cannot just escape up into the ether. You have to tie it down or you lose control of it. An effective tie down will lock in the message that you're trying to convey. You then control it. He's got a lot of great examples and stories in his book about different examples of where somebody didn't tie down a message and it got away from them. Super interesting, fascinating stuff. Again, amplify your influence if you're curious. Another great quote from Rene Rodriguez is assume nothing, communicate everything. I tell my team that all the time. They've started to watch me do some member conversations. And that's one big takeaway that they've had is you have to assume nothing and you have to communicate everything. Another thing he talks about is the love method. His basic process for listening, which is you listen, you observe, you make mention of what you think you heard, you validate it, you confirm, or add whatever you need to add, and then you can expand it from there. So that's the love method of communication. There's a lot in that that's true about love as well. Listening, observing, validating, and expanding. Yeah, it's a pretty flawless way to communicate with people. I hope this is helpful. It talks about communication. It talks about technical sales and why a lot of what we do gets kind of taken for granted. in a lot of different ways. So I hope that's helpful. Covered a lot very quickly there, but I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you all so much again, and yeah, have a good one. Bye.